Aria Chen had always believed that Murphy's Law was specifically designed to ruin her life. If something could go wrong, it absolutely would, and usually at the worst possible moment. This particular Tuesday morning was proving her theory correct, in the most spectacular way imaginable. Her alarm clock had decided to take an unscheduled vacation, leaving her to wake up naturally at 8:47 a.m. when she was supposed to be presenting her latest design concepts to a potential client at 9:15 a.m. The presentation, that could finally get her small graphic design agency the recognition it desperately needed. Aria bolted from her tiny studio apartment in the Mission District, her dark hair still damp from the world's fastest shower. She had thrown on her favorite, emerald green blouse, the one that made her eyes pop, paired with a black pencil skirt and her lucky heels. At least, she thought they were lucky until one of the heel tips decided to break free just as she was rushing down the stairs. "Perfect," she muttered, limping slightly as she made her way to the corner coffee shop. Just absolutely perfect. The morning fog was still clinging to San Francisco's hills, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere that Aria would have appreciated if she wasn't currently living in her own personal nightmare. She needed caffeine, and she needed it now. Inside Brew and Beans, the usual morning chaos was in full swing. Aria joined the line, frantically checking her phone for messages from her business partner Maya while trying to fix her blouse, which had somehow managed to shift during her sprint down the street. The fabric was pulling strangely across her chest, and she could feel the buttons straining. "Large coffee, extra shot, and please tell me you have some kind of miracle cure for broken." "Heels," she said to Jake, the barista who knew her order by heart. "Sorry, Aria, fresh out of shoe miracles today," Jake grinned, starting her order. "But I've got some tape behind the counter if that helps." As Jake worked on her coffee, Aria tried discreetly adjusting her blouse again. The silk material had definitely shifted, and she was pretty sure one of the buttons was hanging on by a thread. She tugged gently at the fabric, trying to realign everything properly. That's when disaster struck. The top button of her blouse chose that exact moment to surrender to gravity, popping off and landing with a tiny ping on the coffee shop floor. Aria's eyes widened in horror as she realized her blouse was now gaping open, revealing far more of her lace camisole than was appropriate for a business meeting. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she whispered, clutching the fabric together with one hand, while trying to reach for her coffee with the other. In her panic, she miscalculated the distance to her cup. Her elbow knocked into the person behind her, sending his drink flying in a perfect arc through the air. The steaming hot coffee seemed to move in slow motion as it sailed toward the large floor-to-ceiling windows of the coffee shop, except the coffee didn't hit the window. It hit something much, much worse. Through the glass, Aria could see a sleek black limousine parked directly outside. The coffee splashed against the passenger window, creating abstract brown patterns on the pristine surface. For a moment, time seemed frozen. Then the window rolled down. Aria's heart stopped. The man inside the limousine was devastatingly handsome in that effortless way that seemed almost unfair. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, sharp cheekbones, and the kind of jawline that belonged in magazine advertisements. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Deep blue, like the ocean during a storm, and currently fixed directly on her. He wasn't angry. He should have been furious. Instead, he looked amused. "I am so sorry," Aria called out, still clutching her blouse together with one hand. "I'll pay for cleaning. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." The man stepped out of the limousine, and Aria realized he was even more impressive standing up. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about anything as mundane as coffee stains or broken heels. "Please don't worry about it," he said, his voice warm and rich like expensive whiskey. Though I have to say, that's quite an interesting way to start a conversation. Aria felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I wasn't trying to start a conversation. I was trying to survive the morning from hell, and apparently I'm taking innocent bystanders down with me. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in Aria's chest. Wyatt Sterling, he said, extending his hand. And I have to say, this is the most memorable morning I've had in months. Aria Chen, she replied, automatically, then realized she was about to shake his hand while holding her blouse closed. I would shake your hand, but I'm currently experiencing a wardrobe malfunction of epic proportions. Wyatt's eyes flickered down to where she was clutching her shirt, then back to her face with perfect gentlemanly discretion. Would you like some help with that? Before Aria could protest, he was shrugging out of his suit jacket. The movement was fluid, practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. He held it out to her, and she could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her want to lean closer. I couldn't possibly, Aria started, but Wyatt was already stepping closer. Please, he said softly. Let me help. There was something in his voice, a gentleness that made her defenses crumble. She released her grip on her blouse and slipped her arms into his jacket. It was warm from his body heat and ridiculously oversized on her, but it covered everything that needed covering. Thank you, she whispered, suddenly very aware of how close he was standing. You're welcome, Wyatt replied, his voice just as quiet. Now, about that meeting you're rushing to. Aria blinked in surprise. How did you know I have a meeting? Lucky. Guess. You have that look of someone who's fighting against time and losing. He glanced at his watch, a sleek piece that probably cost more than her car. Where do you need to be? The Sterling building downtown, Aria said without thinking. I have a presentation at 9:15, and at this rate, I'll be lucky if I make it by noon. Wyatt's expression shifted slightly, something flickering in his eyes that she couldn't quite read. The Sterling building? Yes, it's this big tech company. Sterling Innovations. They're looking for a new creative agency to handle their upcoming product launch, and my partner Maya and I are hoping to land the contract. It would be huge for us. A slow smile spread across Wyatt's face, and Aria got the distinct feeling she was missing something important. Well then, he said, gesturing toward his limousine. It seems like fate has a sense of humor. Why don't I give you a ride? Aria stared at him, then at the limousine, then back at him. I couldn't possibly impose like that. You've already done so much, and I've ruined your morning. You've made my morning, Wyatt corrected, opening the car door for her. Trust me, this is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in weeks. Please, let me help. Something in his tone made her hesitate. There was a sincerity there that went beyond mere politeness. Against her better judgment, against every instinct that told her this was too good to be true, Aria found herself nodding. Okay, she said, settling into the luxurious leather seat. But I'm buying you a new coffee to replace the one I destroyed. Wyatt slid in beside her, and Aria caught another whiff of that intoxicating cologne. I'll hold you to that, he said, with a grin that made her heart skip. As the limousine pulled away from the curb, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. She had no idea that the man sitting beside her, making casual conversation about San Francisco traffic, was the very person she was hoping to impress at her 9:15 meeting. She had no idea that Wyatt Sterling, billionaire CEO of Sterling Innovations, had just fallen completely and utterly under the spell of a beautiful graphic designer who'd accidentally thrown coffee at his car while dealing with a wardrobe malfunction. And she definitely had no idea that this disastrous morning was about to become the best thing that had ever happened to her. The Sterling building was everything Aria had imagined and more. 50 stories of gleaming glass and steel that seemed to pierce the San Francisco sky, with Sterling Innovations emblazoned in elegant silver letters across the top. As the limousine pulled up to the main entrance, Aria felt her stomach twist with a combination of nerves and excitement. "This is incredible," she breathed, pressing her face to the window like a child at a candy store. "I've seen pictures, but being here in person, it's like something out of a movie." Wyatt watched her reaction with an expression she couldn't quite read. "First time visiting?" "First time even getting close," Aria admitted. "My partner Maya and I have been trying to get a meeting with Sterling Innovations for months. When we finally got the call last week, I literally screamed so loud our neighbor called to check if I was okay." The driver came around to open Aria's door, and she stepped out onto the pristine sidewalk, still wearing Wyatt's jacket over her broken blouse. She turned to thank him again, but he was already getting out of the car behind her. "You don't have to walk me in," Aria said quickly. "You've done more than enough already." "Actually, I think I'll head inside too," Wyatt replied, his tone casual. "I have some business to take care of." Together, they walked through the massive glass doors into a lobby that took Aria's breath away. The space was enormous, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a living wall of plants that stretched 3 stories high. Everything screamed success, innovation, and money. Aria checked in at the reception desk, trying to project confidence despite feeling completely out of place in her borrowed jacket and broken heel. The receptionist, a polished woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, smiled professionally. "Ms. Chen, perfect timing. They're ready for you in conference room A on the 40th floor. You can take the express elevator." As they walked toward the elevators, Aria became acutely aware of the curious looks they were getting. She and Wyatt made an odd pair. Her in her disheveled state, him looking like he belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine. "I should probably give you your jacket back before I go up," Aria said, starting to shrug out of it. "Keep it for now," Wyatt said, pressing the elevator button. "Return it after your meeting." "But how will I find you? This building is huge." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Wyatt gestured for her to enter first. "Don't worry about that. I have a feeling we'll run into each other again." As the elevator climbed, Aria found herself stealing glances at Wyatt in the polished metal reflection of the doors. There was something about him that she couldn't shake, a magnetic quality that made her want to know more. She'd never been the type to fall for pretty faces or expensive suits. But there was something deeper here, something that made her feel like she'd known him longer than 30 minutes. "What kind of business are you here for?" she asked, trying to make conversation and calm her nerves. "Oh, the usual," Wyatt replied vaguely. "Meetings, decisions, that sort of thing." The elevator stopped at the 40th floor, and Aria's stomach dropped for reasons that had nothing to do with the sudden halt. This was it, the moment that could change everything for her and Maya's small agency. "Wish me luck," she said, stepping toward the doors. "You won't need it," Wyatt said confidently. "You're going to be amazing." The conviction in his voice surprised her. How could he be so sure when he barely knew her? But something in his tone made her stand a little straighter, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could actually pull this off. Conference Room A was a glass-walled space overlooking the city, with a massive table surrounded by ergonomic chairs. 3 people were already seated, and Aria recognized one of them from the company website, Rebecca Martinez, head of marketing. The other 2 were unfamiliar, but they had that same polished, successful look that seemed to be a requirement for working here. "Miss Chen, welcome," Rebecca said, standing to shake her hand. "I love the jacket, very chic." Aria felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. I had a bit of a wardrobe emergency this morning, and a kind stranger lent it to me." "Well, it works," Rebecca assured her with a smile. "Shall we get started? I'm eager to see what you and your partner have prepared for us." For the next 45 minutes, Aria poured her heart and soul into the presentation. She showed them mood boards, concept sketches, and digital mock-ups for Sterling Innovation's upcoming AI assistant launch. She talked about emotional connection, brand storytelling, and the importance of making cutting-edge technology feel human and accessible. The room was silent when she finished, and Aria's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for their response. "That was exceptional," Rebecca said finally. "The emotional angle, the focus on real human connections. It's exactly what we've been looking for but couldn't quite articulate." One of the other executives, a stern-looking man in his 50s, leaned forward. "The concepts are strong, but this is a major launch. We need to be sure we're working with an agency that can handle the scope and scale of what we're planning." Aria's heart sank slightly. This was the part she'd been dreading, the part where her small agency's lack of big-name clients would count against them. "I understand your concerns," she began, "but sometimes fresh perspective and personal attention can be more valuable than size. We may not have the biggest client list, but we have passion, creativity, and the hunger to prove ourselves." The executives exchanged glances, and Aria could practically feel her dreams slipping away. Then Rebecca's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a frown. "Excuse me for just a moment," Rebecca said, stepping away to take what appeared to be an urgent call. Aria used the brief break to gather her materials, trying to read the room and prepare herself for what she suspected would be a polite rejection. The other executives were whispering quietly to each other, occasionally glancing in her direction. Rebecca returned, looking slightly flustered. "I apologize, but we're going to have to cut this short. Mr. Sterling has requested to review all the proposals personally before we make any decisions." "Mr. Sterling?" Aria repeated. "The CEO wants to review them?" "Apparently so. It's unusual, but when the boss wants something..." Rebecca shrugged with a smile. "We'll be in touch within the next few days with our decision." As Aria packed up her presentation materials, her mind raced. Having the CEO review her proposal could be either incredibly good or incredibly bad. On one hand, it meant her work would be seen by the person who made the final decisions. On the other hand, it meant facing someone who probably had impossibly high standards and little patience for anything less than perfection. She made her way back to the elevator, still wearing Wyatt's jacket and wondering how she was going to return it to him. The elevator descended smoothly, and she found herself hoping she might run into him in the lobby. Instead, when the doors opened on the ground floor, she saw him immediately. He was standing near the reception desk, talking quietly with the same polished woman who had checked Aria in earlier. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. "How did it go?" he asked, walking over to meet her. "Good, I think," Aria replied, though she wasn't entirely sure. "They seemed to like the concepts, but apparently the CEO wants to review everything personally before they make a decision." Something flickered across Wyatt's face, an expression she couldn't quite read. "The CEO, you say?" "Wyatt Sterling," Aria said, not noticing how Wyatt's eyebrows rose slightly. "I've never met him, but I've heard he's brilliant. Revolutionary work in artificial intelligence, built this company from nothing. He's kind of a legend in the tech world." "Is he now?" Wyatt asked, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. "Definitely, though I've also heard he can be pretty intimidating, very demanding, perfectionist tendencies." Aria paused, then looked up at him curiously. "You work in tech too, don't you? You seem to know your way around this building pretty well." "You could say that," Wyatt replied, his smile growing wider. "Tell me, what would you do if you met this legendary CEO? Hypothetically speaking." Aria considered the question seriously. "I'd probably be terrified at first, but then I'd try to remember that he's just a person, you know, someone who started with an idea and worked to make it reality. I'd want to show him that I understand what his company represents: innovation, progress, making the world better through technology." Wyatt nodded slowly, something soft and warm in his expression. "That's a good answer. Here's your jacket back," Aria said, starting to slip out of it. "Thank you again for everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through this morning without your help." "Actually," Wyatt said, placing a gentle hand on her arm to stop her from removing the jacket. "Would you be interested in having dinner with me tonight? I'd love to hear more about your work, your ideas." Aria blinked in surprise. In all the chaos of the morning, she'd almost forgotten that this incredible man was essentially a stranger who had no reason to be interested in her beyond basic human kindness. Yes," she said, surprising herself with how quickly she answered. "I'd like that." "Perfect," Wyatt said, pulling out his phone. "Give me your number and I'll send you the details." As Aria rattled off her number, she couldn't help but feel like she was in some kind of dream. First the meeting of a lifetime, now a dinner invitation from the most attractive man she'd ever encountered. Maybe her luck was finally changing. What she didn't know was that Wyatt Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, had already made his decision about her proposal. What she didn't know was that he'd been watching her presentation through the conference room's internal camera system, mesmerized not just by her creative vision, but by the passionate way she presented it. And what she definitely didn't know was that the man who had rescued her from her morning disaster was the same legendary CEO she'd just spent 10 minutes describing to his face. But she was about to find out. The restaurant Wyatt had chosen was unlike anywhere Aria had ever been. Perched on the top floor of a downtown high-rise, Skyline offered panoramic views of San Francisco Bay and the glittering city below. As the hostess led her to a private table by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Aria felt like she was floating above the world. She'd spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that Maya had insisted made her look mysterious and sophisticated. Now, sitting in this elegant space, she wondered if she was underdressed for whatever this was. Wyatt arrived exactly on time, and Aria's breath caught when she saw him. Gone was the business suit from earlier. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a crisp white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, looking effortlessly handsome and more relaxed than she'd seen him all day. "You look beautiful," he said as he sat down across from her, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you. This place is incredible," Aria replied, gesturing toward the view. "I feel like I'm in a movie." "I thought you might like it," Wyatt said, signaling the waiter. "Tell me about yourself, Aria. How did you end up in graphic design?" As they ordered wine and appetizers, Aria found herself opening up in a way that surprised her. She told him about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about her parents who had immigrated from Taiwan and worked 2 jobs each to put her through art school. She talked about meeting Maya in college, about their shared dream of starting their own agency, about the struggles and small victories that had led them to this point. "What about you?" Aria asked as their main courses arrived. "What's your story?" Wyatt was quiet for a moment, twirling his fork in his pasta. "It's not as interesting as yours," he said finally. "I doubt that. You carry yourself like someone who's accomplished a lot, and you're obviously successful." She gestured around the restaurant. "This isn't exactly McDonald's." He laughed, and the sound sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Fair point. I work in technology. Started my own company a few years ago." "What kind of technology?" "Artificial intelligence, mostly. Software that helps people and businesses solve problems more efficiently." Aria leaned forward, interested. "That's fascinating. I love the idea of technology that actually helps people instead of just making things more complicated." "That's exactly the philosophy we try to follow," Wyatt said, and there was passion in his voice now. "Too often, tech companies get caught up in features and forget about the human element. The best innovations are the ones that feel natural, intuitive." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. Aria found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn in by Wyatt's quick wit and unexpected humor. He was different from anyone she'd ever met. Successful and sophisticated, yes, but also genuine in a way that seemed rare in his world. As the evening wound down, Wyatt walked her to his car, where his driver was waiting to take her home. The night air was cool, and Aria pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "I had a wonderful time," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "Thank you for dinner." "Thank you for saying yes," Wyatt replied, stepping closer. "Aria, I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like I've been waiting to meet you my whole life." Her heart fluttered at his words, at the intensity in his eyes. "It doesn't sound crazy," she whispered. He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle against her skin. "Can I see you again?" "Yes," she breathed, and then he was kissing her, soft and sweet under the city lights. When they broke apart, Aria felt dizzy and breathless. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "I'll call you tomorrow," Wyatt promised, helping her into the car, as say. The limousine pulled away. Aria pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. She had no idea that tomorrow would bring revelations that would change everything between them. The next morning, Aria was at her desk early, trying to focus on other projects while waiting for news from Sterling Innovations. Maya burst through, the door at exactly 9 a.m. practically vibrating with excitement. "They called," Maya announced, waving her phone in the air. "Rebecca Martinez just called. They want to meet with us again today at 2 p.m. "What did she say?" Aria asked, her heart racing. "Not much, just that Mr. Sterling wants to discuss the proposal personally." "This is it, Aria. This could be everything we've worked for." The morning dragged by slowly, and Aria found herself checking her phone repeatedly, hoping for a message from Wyatt. When nothing came, she told herself he was probably busy with work. That successful men like him didn't text constantly like college boys. At 1:30, she and Maya took a cab to the Sterling building, both of them nervous and excited. This time, they were directed to a different elevator bank, one that required a special key card to access the upper floors. "The executive level," Maya whispered as they rose past the 40th floor. "We're really in the big leagues now." The 51st floor was a revelation. Instead of the open office space Aria had expected, it was an elegant executive suite with rich wood paneling, original artwork, and commanding views of the city. Rebecca met them in the reception area, looking more formal than she had the day before. "Mr. Sterling is ready to see you," she said, leading them down a hallway lined with awards and framed magazine covers. "Just a heads up. He's been very interested in your proposal. Very interested." They stopped in front of massive double doors made of polished mahogany. Rebecca knocked once, then opened the doors to reveal the largest office Aria had ever seen. Behind an imposing desk sat a man with his back to them, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Mr. Sterling," Rebecca announced, "Aria Chen and Maya Patel are here." The chair turned slowly, and Aria's world tilted on its axis. Was Wyatt. Wyatt, who had rescued her from her morning disaster. Wyatt, who had taken her to dinner and kissed her under the city lights. Wyatt, who was apparently the legendary CEO she'd been describing to him just yesterday. "Hello, Aria," he said softly, his blue eyes searching her face for her reaction. Maya looked back and forth between them, clearly sensing the tension in the room but not understanding it. "Do you two know each other?" Aria couldn't speak. Her mind was reeling, trying to process this revelation. Everything from yesterday suddenly made sense. How he'd known his way around the building, why he'd seemed amused when she talked about the intimidating CEO, the way the receptionist had looked at them when they walked in together. "We met yesterday," Wyatt said when Aria remained silent. "Aria had a small accident involving my car." "Oh," Maya said, still confused but trying to roll with it. "Well, that's coincidental." Wyatt stood up, coming around the desk. He was wearing another perfectly tailored suit, looking every inch the powerful executive she'd heard about. But his eyes were the same ones that had looked at her with such warmth the night before. "Maya, would you mind if I spoke with Aria privately for a moment?" he asked, his tone polite but clearly not really a request. "Of course," Maya said, though she shot Aria a look that clearly said, "We're going to talk about this later." When the door closed behind Maya, the office fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Aria stared at Wyatt, feeling betrayed and confused and hurt all at once. "You lied to me," she said finally. "I never lied," Wyatt replied carefully. "I just didn't tell you everything. You let me talk about you like you were some stranger. You let me go on and on about how intimidating and demanding the great Wyatt Sterling was, and you just sat there amused by the whole thing." "I wanted to tell you," he said, stepping closer. "But I was enjoying getting to know the real you, not the version of yourself you might have presented if you'd known who I was." Aria shook her head, backing away from him. "So this was all some kind of game to you? Poor little graphic designer doesn't know she's having dinner with a billionaire CEO? That's not what this was," Wyatt said firmly. "What happened between us last night was real, the most real thing I've experienced in years. How am I supposed to believe that? How do I know any of it was genuine?" Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he seemed to struggle with something. "Because I'm about to do something that goes against every piece of business advice I've ever received." He walked back to his desk and picked up a thick folder. "Your proposal was exceptional, Aria, the best we've seen. My marketing team wants to hire your agency immediately." Aria felt a flutter of hope, quickly followed by suspicion. But I'm not going to do it," Wyatt said quietly. "I'm going to recommend we go with one of the other agencies." Aria stared at him in shock. "What? Why?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "And I won't have you wondering for the rest of your life whether you got this job because of your talent or because I wanted to keep you close." The words hit her like a physical blow. She sank into one of the chairs facing his desk, her mind spinning. "I don't understand," she whispered. Wyatt came around and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I want you to succeed because you're brilliant, not because of whatever this is between us. I want you to build your agency into everything you've dreamed of, and I want to be there cheering you on from the sidelines." Tears pricked at Aria's eyes. "You'd give up a business opportunity for me?" "In a heartbeat," he said without hesitation. "Aria, I've spent my entire adult life building this company, focusing on success and achievement. But yesterday morning, when you literally crashed into my life, everything changed. You made me remember what it feels like to be just human." She looked down at their joined hands, her heart warring with her head. "This is crazy. We barely know each other." "Then let's get to know each other," Wyatt said softly. "No business deals, no contracts, no complications. Just us." Aria met his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope. "What if I said I don't care about the Sterling account? What if I said I'd rather have you?" "Then I'd say you're even more amazing than I thought," he replied with a smile. "But I'd also say you're not thinking clearly. This opportunity will come again, from someone else, when you're ready for it. But right now, I want to focus on us." 6 months later, Aria stood in the bathroom of her new office space, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Chen and Patel. Design had landed 3 major clients in the past 4 months, including a tech startup that had specifically sought them out after seeing their innovative approach to brand storytelling. "You ready?" Maya called from outside the door. "The photographer is here for the magazine shoot." Aria smoothed her dress one last time and stepped out. Their agency had been featured in Design Weekly as one of the rising stars to watch, and today they were doing a photo shoot for the accompanying article. As she posed with Maya in their bright, modern office space, Aria caught sight of a familiar figure through the window. Wyatt was standing across the street, leaning against his car, watching with a proud smile on his face. When he saw her looking, he held up a bouquet of flowers and pointed to his watch. Their lunch date. She'd almost forgotten in all the excitement of the photo shoot. "Go," Maya said, having noticed where Aria's attention had wandered. "I can handle the rest of this. And Aria, I'm happy for you. You deserve all of this." 20 minutes later, Aria was sitting across from Wyatt in their favorite cafe. Not the fancy restaurant where they'd had their first official date, but the little neighborhood place where they'd started meeting for lunch when both their schedules allowed. "So, how does it feel to be a rising star?" Wyatt asked, sliding the flowers across the table to her. "Surreal," Aria admitted. 6 months ago, I was throwing coffee at limousines and trying to convince people to take a chance on us. Now we have more work than we can handle." "I told you that you were brilliant," Wyatt said with satisfaction. "You also told me you were falling in love with me," Aria said, her cheeks warming at the memory. "Past tense," Wyatt corrected, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I fell completely, utterly, irrevocably in love with you." "Good thing," Aria said, bringing his hand to her lips and pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. "Because I fell pretty hard, too." A year later, they were back on the rooftop of the Skyline restaurant, the same place where they'd had their first real date. But this time, the setting was different. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and the entire rooftop had been transformed into a garden paradise with flowers everywhere. "Wyatt, what is all this?" Aria asked as he led her to the center of the space. "This," he said, turning to face her, "is me asking you to take another chance on a man whose life you accidentally walked into." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box, and Aria's hands flew to her mouth. "Aria Chen," he said, his voice steady but his eyes bright with emotion. "You changed my life the moment you spilled coffee on my car. You showed me what it means to love someone not for what they can do for you, but for who they are. You taught me that the best things in life aren't planned or calculated. They're the beautiful accidents that catch us completely off guard." Aria was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked down at the man who had become her entire world. "You've built an incredible business. You've achieved everything you dreamed of, and you did it all on your own terms," Wyatt continued. "Now I'm asking if you'll let me share that life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Aria whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger, a stunning vintage piece with an emerald center stone surrounded by diamonds clearly chosen with care and thoughtfulness rather than mere expense. As he stood and pulled her into his arms, Aria marveled at how perfectly it fit, how it caught the light from the fairy lights above them. "I love you," she said, against his lips as he kissed her. "Even if you are a sneaky billionaire who didn't tell me who he was." "I love you too," he replied with a laugh, "wardrobe malfunctions and all." 2 years later, their wedding was everything Aria had never known she wanted. Instead of a massive society affair, they chose to have an intimate ceremony in Wyatt's family vineyard in Napa Valley, surrounded by close friends and family. Maya served as Aria's maid of honor, and Wyatt's younger brother James was his best man. Aria wore a simple, elegant gown that she'd designed herself, with lace sleeves that reminded her of the camisole she'd been wearing the day they met. Wyatt waited for her at the end of an aisle lined with the same type of flowers he'd brought her to their lunch dates. Simple, beautiful, meaningful rather than ostentatious. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of grapevines with the California, sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Aria thought about the morning that had changed everything. how her worst day had become the beginning of her best life. "I promise to love you through wardrobe malfunctions and coffee spills," Wyatt said as part of his vows, making their guests laugh and Aria cry happy tears. "I promise to love you whether you're in a boardroom or a coffee shop," Aria replied, "and to never throw beverages at your car again." "I might be disappointed if you don't," Wyatt whispered, making her laugh through her tears. Their first dance was to At Last by Etta James, and as they swayed together under the stars, Aria reflected on how perfectly imperfect their love story had been. No fairy tale princess had ever met her prince by accidentally destroying his property while dealing with a clothing catastrophe, but somehow that made it more beautiful, more real. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt murmured against her ear as they danced. "How we're going to tell this story to our children someday," Aria replied. "Mommy and Daddy met when Mommy had a fashion emergency and threw coffee at Daddy's very expensive car." "They'll never believe it," Wyatt said with a grin. "Good thing we have witnesses," Aria replied, gesturing to Maya, who was taking pictures from the edge of the dance floor. 5 years later, Aria Sterling, she'd taken his name but kept her professional identity as Aria Chen, sat in the nursery of their San Francisco home, rocking their 6-month-old daughter Emma to sleep. The baby had Wyatt's dark hair and Aria's curious eyes, and she was already showing signs of inheriting both parents' stubborn streak. Wyatt appeared in the doorway, still wearing his suit from work but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. "How are my girls?" he asked, softly. "Perfect," Aria replied, looking down at Emma's peaceful face. "Though I think she's going to be trouble. She's already trying to grab everything within reach." "She gets that from you," Wyatt said, coming over to kiss the top of Aria's head. "Remember how you grabbed my attention and never let go?" "That was an accident," Aria protested quietly. "The best kind," Wyatt replied, gently taking Emma from her arms and placing her in her crib. Chen and Patel Design had grown into one of the most sought-after creative agencies on the West Coast, with offices in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Maya had gotten married to a wonderful architect named David, and they were expecting their first child in the fall. Sterling Innovations had gone public 2 years earlier, making Wyatt one of the youngest billionaires in tech, but he'd never let success change who he was at his core. As they stood together in their daughter's nursery, watching her sleep, Aria marveled at the life they'd built together. It wasn't the life she'd planned or expected, but it was better than anything she could have imagined. "Do you ever think about that morning?" she asked quietly. "What would have happened if I hadn't been running late, if my button hadn't popped off, if I hadn't knocked over that coffee?" "Every day," Wyatt replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And every day I'm grateful for that broken heel, that missing button, and that perfectly aimed coffee cup. Even though it ruined your car?" "Especially because it ruined my car," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Best insurance claim I ever filed." Aria laughed softly, leaning back against his chest. "I love you, Wyatt Sterling." "I love you too, Aria Sterling. Thank you for crashing into my life." Outside their window, San Francisco glittered in the darkness, full of millions of people living their own stories, having their own chances encounters, making their own beautiful mistakes. And somewhere in the city, another young woman was probably running late, having a wardrobe malfunction, and preparing to accidentally change someone's life forever. Because the best love stories, Aria had learned, weren't the ones that went according to plan. They were the ones that began with coffee stains and broken heels, with embarrassment and laughter, with two people who were brave enough to see magic in the chaos and love in the unexpected. The end.